Hi everyone, my name is Eric Schurter and I'm the product manager for the Static Site Editor group, which is part of the create stage of the DevOps lifecycle here at GitLab. And I want to talk to you today about what we have planned for the 13.3 milestone, which is very much a continuation of the work we were doing in 13.2. And in here we're really focused on making the Static Site Editor as solid as possible in an effort to make it available on the GitLab handbook for collaboration across the team and for everyone to contribute. Now, the list of issues we have on our plate is in our planning issue, which I'll link in the video description. I want to highlight just a few of the more prominent ones, and again, we're really focused on getting the Static Site Editor available within the GitLab handbook, and our approach has been to do what we need to do to configure the project, to use the Static Site Editor, which is complete, and make it available in the product pages of the handbook. That is also complete, but in the process of doing that, we uncovered a few issues and some areas where the UX could be improved. So we're going to address that feedback before making it available to all pages. One of the more critical and impactful changes that we're looking to implement is limiting the number of changes that get introduced in a merge request by simply entering the WYSIWYG mode of the Static Site Editor. So when you open up the Static Site Editor, in order to present the WYSIWYG mode, we need to do a round trip through Markdown to HTML converter, and that requires a very consistent Markdown syntax. And when it writes it back out, it uses a documented set of stylistic preferences. So, for example, it used asterisks instead of hyphens for unordered lists, or it doesn't increment, or it does increment numeral lists, ordered lists. It increments the numerals in those lists. And what we found is those defaults that came with the editor were not consistent with the GitLab Markdown style guide. So we introduced a whole bunch of extraneous edits into the file, and the merge requests were rather noisy. In order to make it a little more consistent, we've just overridden and applied the GitLab handbook style guide to the Markdown converter, and that should limit the number of changes and make the merge requests much easier to read. This will require a little bit of pre-formatting, and some of these initial merge requests are likely to involve some Markdown cleanup, but actually the cleanup will be in order to bring it up to standards rather than anything necessary to make it work with the editor itself. And so the end result will be a much more consistent Markdown style in our code base, and something that will work very well with the Static Site Editor. Now, one thing we were working on in 13.2 that we didn't quite wrap up was the ability to upload an image using the Static Site Editor. So we'll be finishing that up in 13.3. Again, just to recap from last month, this is an extension and iteration on our feature where we display images in the WYSIWYG editor. You can add an image that's hosted elsewhere already using a URL, and it'll show up in the editor. But if you don't have an image hosted on a CDN or within your project already, this feature will allow you to upload from your desktop right into the Static Site Editor, and then that asset will be included in the merge request and saved in your project. Most of the work is done. You can see in the issue there's merge requests that are already merged, but we have one final merge request to finish up. And lastly, in order to enable the GitLab handbook to be efficiently edited and people to work really well with the Static Site Editor, we found that there were enough pages that used YouTube videos in the content that we wanted to create a feature in the toolbar to quickly embed a video. This is possible by switching over to the Markdown view, the source code, and writing an HTML figure tag and including the iframe. But we're looking to introduce a toolbar item that would pre-format that for you, basically. And this would allow people creating content in the static site editor WYSIWYG mode to quickly drop a YouTube link into a modal and have a correctly formatted iframe using the right player and the right settings for full screen and all those things. And that's all that I wanted to highlight for this month, and we have a lot more planned in our backlog. So excited about what comes next. Thanks for listening, and see you next month.